Welcome to part 2 of my Spanish language course. This is a grammar course, and you'll find that in the course there are 6 parts, 1 to 6. We're at part 2. And part 2, there are 3 steps. Part 2, we're concerned with verbs. Part 1, we were looking at nouns. So Spanish verbs. You'll find that verbs I have put in red. Verbs. Now, verbs you might find frightening, but verbs are versatile, and indeed the term versatile comes from the same word as verb and convert, invert, revert, divert. Vertere, the Latin, means to change. The whole idea of verbs is that they are a word that enables us to express action, movement, and states of being, i.e., change. In this simple proposition, this statement, we have Pepe cooks soup. If you can understand this, then you will be do anything you want with your Spanish language. Pepe in green is the noun, subject. Cooks is the verb in red, and soup is the object. It's also a noun, but we go subject, verb, object. Now, this is the way most sentences are constructed. It's the natural order of European language. Remember, we are looking at verbs cook. So I can take away soup and we can just say Pepe cooks in English. I'll explain to you why. We're going to understand what's being said, and we can strip it again down to cooks. The action of cooking. In Spanish, to cook, we will just say cocinar. Cocinar. The problem with Spanish is that in order to speak it, the way we communicate in English isn't always the same in Spanish. I'll explain to you. For example, in English, we will say, I am hungry. But in Spanish, they don't say that. They have to say, I have hunger. You see? You say, she is 30 years old. Well, the Spanish have two ways to translate is. Ser and estar. If you say he is a teacher, again in Spanish you don't say that. You have to say he is teacher. You don't use a. I have a plan. There are two translations of the English verb have. You can say I put 2 there. Number 2, and 2 ways to be. I'll explain to you why, and which is a great reason why grammar allows us to understand the Spanish language and to be able to communicate correctly. Grammar. So let's begin. Step 4. Remember, of course, that most of what we say has a subject, for example, Pepe, and it has an action, which, in this case, we've chosen the verb to cook. A noun substantiates an idea. The idea is Pepe. And then we have the action. What is Pepe doing? Pepe in this term is cooking. This is called a complete thought. Most of what we say has a subject and an action. Don't need to know this, but nonetheless, Excuse the background noise. I think someone is preaching. The verb to preach in Spanish, predicar. So there are two sorts of verb. There is the personal verb, personal actions that revolve around a person, a human person or an animal. Is to be, I am, you are, I have, see, smell, think, feel. These are all personal verbs. And we have other set of verbs called hit, to dig, to cook, to find. You see, those are action verbs. They're called dynamic verbs. So we have one set of verbs which deals with, like, I am happy, for example, or I smell the soup, and then you have another section, I hit, dig, cook, find, explore, another type of verb. I'll explain to you now what it was. Remember that when we look at a verb, red represents verb. Verb will have to go with something. We say, I cook, you cook, he cooks, etc. It's called person. You have to have what's called person, someone or something. Then they cook is plural, and then you have singular, he cooks. See, plural, singular, and then verbs, part 3 we have, when did it happen? Did it happen in the past or did it happen in the present? You see? And then we have, how did the action unfold? Pepe was cooking, Pepe cooked, Pepe is cooking. So how the action unfolded. All of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4, will be easy to understand as we progress, okay? We're looking at what verbs involve. Verb needs to be formed by somebody, called a person. It needs to be singular or plural. You see, a lot of these we will do naturally without consciously being aware of what verbs are doing. Now, so a verb, as we've established, we'll look at a state of being, I am, I have, a dog, I have money, or an action, I dig, I find, I ran, I swam, I swim. See, there's two sorts of verbs. The verb performs the action of the noun, as I've explained. Right. You might be thinking about, well, this is a Spanish course. It is. But by understanding this, you're going to be able to make sense of how to translate Spanish into English and English into Spanish quickly. So we're going to start by looking at the Spanish verbs to be and to have. Now, these two are actually called stative verbs, but you will understand that it's difficult to express an idea or much without the verb to be or the verb to have. In the group, which are called stative, to be and to have, which we're going to look at now, you will also have feel, I feel happy, I appear happy, he looks sad, the soup smells bad, and then in the other side you have like own and belong. All these are to do with your immediate personal self. State of being and a state of possession. Now, in Spanish, there are two words to translate to be, and there are two words to translate to have. Are you with me? And the two ways are, finally got to some Spanish, are estar and ser, to be. And to have, we translate in Spanish tener and haber. Remember that the H is very silent in Spanish, so you could almost translate it as haber. But it's called haber with the H. Very different. The T, tener and haber, they both mean to have. In English, there is just one verb to be. I am, you are, he is, we are, you are, they are. In Spanish, there are two different words. Let's look at how we choose which. So, within the idea of to be and to have, which we call stative verbs, there is a narrower thing called copular verbs. Copular verbs. Now, this is just a little section in there, and copular verbs are easy because they take an adjective. They're always followed by an adjective. So we have Mendoza looks unhappy, or Mendoza appears unhappy, or Mendoza is unhappy. So unhappy is an adjective. And a copular verb is simply this basic group of personal verb, if you like, which deals with an adjective. You can always return to this if you like. You're probably keen to get into your Spanish, but if you can understand this, you're going to be able to get it right. So remember, a copular verb if you want that term. If you don't want it, let it go. If you want, but a copular verb is to be, to seem, to appear, to look, to smell, to taste. Anything that you can follow by an adjective. Now, in Spanish, this is how you translate the word to be. Okay? Spanish say that there are two states of being. There are temporary states and there are permanent states. So if I say to you, Pepe is, using the verb to be, Pepe is the adjective happy, a copular verb, remember. Copular just means that it takes an adjective, okay? But over time you'll go, hey, okay, cool. This is the basic introduction to verbs. Here, we're going to get more complex. So try to keep focused. Pepe is happy. Now, is Pepe being happy temporary state or a permanent state? Well, happiness usually is we call a temporary state rather than a permanent state. So for temporary states, moods, happiness, emotions, feelings and opinions, Spanish translate as estar. Use the verb estar to translate to be. And for permanent states such as buildings, you know, a building is kind of permanent. A profession, like if you're a banker, builder, plumber, dancer, singer, professions are also translated using ser. It's considered permanent. Time is also translated using ser. Age, your age, is also translated as ser. These are called permanent qualities. So emotions and things are translated using estar, and permanent things are the be to be is translated as ser. So Pepe is happy. It's temporary, okay? It's an emotion. So we use the verb estar. Pepe está feliz. This I will leave to the more advanced course, but it's okay, we had it there. Mendoza is laughing. It's temporary, so we use the verb estar, and to conjugate that, i.e. to make it work, Mendoza está sonriendo. Mendoza is laughing. Now, this actually is called the present continuous. If I said Mendoza laughs, but I've got Mendoza is laughing, this is called the present continuous or the present progressive. But estar is also used to form the present continuous. Remember, present simple, Mendoza sonríe, Mendoza laughs, and Mendoza is laughing, Mendoza está sonriendo. I hope you do know the verb to laugh is sonreír. Okay, of course, I'm not here to be in your dictionary. I'm not here to give you a course in the dictionary or even a phrase book. We're looking at how to construct phrases and have conversations, understanding what's being said. Now, or how to translate and interpret what other people have said. Now, this grammar is critical to use with street level conversation and interacting in your travels or where you live. People often say you need grammar for reading a book. You need grammar to sit in a formal situation. It's not true at all. I can tell you from more than a decade of experience, you're never going to break into speaking good Spanish if you haven't got some grammar. So Mendoza is laughing. Laughing, it's an emotion, it's a temporary state, so we use the verb estar. It's not permanent. Now, look at a permanent state or what's considered a permanent condition. Pedro is a man, the verb to be. I am, you are, he is. The verb Pedro is a man. It's considered permanent. Your sex is considered permanent when we translate, and it's called Pedro es un hombre. You don't say Pedro está un hombre, you say Pedro es un hombre. Now, if you don't know the verb table for the verb to be, ser, could you just look at it quickly? We're not going to get far if you don't know what the verb ser is in Spanish. I'll tell you because I am a kind linguist. Soy, eres, es, somos, sois, son. Okay, that's the verb table, the present tense of the verb to be, ser. So Pedro soy, Pedro es. We go Pedro es un hombre. Using the verb ser. Now, we'll look at to have. The critical, remember the two verbs. I've looked at to be, the permanent state. For example, Pedro es un hombre. We've looked at the temporary state, going backwards here. Mendoza está sonriendo. Laughing is actually here a present continuous. But you say Mendoza is happy. Mendoza está feliz. Okay? So we looked at to be, permanent and temporary states. Now we're looking at the verb to have. Now to have has two different ways to translate to have. What are they? Have. Now, if I say I have eaten, have eaten it's called the present perfect, and together it formed the present perfect. I have and eaten, two parts of a verb structure. It's called a compound tense. Compound means two, okay? Think of a compound, if you're an accountant, compound interest. What other compounds are there? A compound is a mixture of substances. So it's a mixture of two. In grammar we call have eaten. So to translate a compound, a verb, a progressive aspect verb, we use haber. I have eaten. we use the verb haber. I have money using this object money. Money is not part of the verb. Money is the object, unlike here. And we use tener. So tener we use when we have an object, and haber we use when we're forming a continuous tense. Remember, I had eaten, I have eaten. Have eaten is the present perfect, and had eaten is the past perfect. So they're very different here. You see the dark blue is an object. I have money. I have a drink. I have a bag, etc. I have a dog. All these are called objects. We use tener. And when we have that, the connect is haber. Well, let's look at this more. It's so easy once you get to understand. So as I said, when have is used with an auxiliary verb, it's called I have eaten. We use haber. Yo he comido. And when we use the progressive, in terms of a possessive verb, possessing an object, we use tener. Strictly, that's the stative. So, you can see here what we've just been saying. I have eaten is haber. Yo he comido. Remember the verb table of have. Has, hemos, habéis, and the present tense of haber. So yo he comido. Now with possession, I have money, it's yo tengo dinero. Tener is to have when there's an object, i.e. something. By an object we mean an object, something. Think of it as an, physical. This baton made out of wood. I have a baton. I could say, yo tengo un batón, because conveniently the word for baton in Spanish is the same, baton. See, so yo tengo un batón. Yo tengo dinero. Tener. Yo tengo, can you think of something? Yourself? Yo tengo, you have a lighter. Yo tengo una encendedora. I have a drink. Yo tengo una bebida. Una bebida is to drink, okay? So when I'm saying I have eaten, I had eaten, etc., we use haber. Pepe has a spoon. Which verb would you use? Not those two, by the way. Pepe has a spoon. Is that haber or tener? Is spoon an object? Bear with me with the background noise. Is as a spoon, please. Is a spoon an object? Or is this part of a continuous verb? It's an object. Now, Dolores had eaten. Is eaten an object? No, it had eaten forms this continuous verb, past continuous. So, do you remember which one it would be? I'll be honest with you, that is an error there. I ought to have put tener and haber. Tener and haber. Excuse me. So a spoon is an object, so we use tener, and had, continuous tense, we use haber. Okay, fix that. Before we move forward, I will now recap. We will return to this later. Well, we won't. We've returned to it now. Spanish have two words to translate to be and two verbs to translate to have. Estar, to be, is used for temporary states, I am happy, and ser is used for permanent states, That is a tree. See, that is a pronoun. That is a tree. A tree is considered a permanent state, so you use es, ser, which is the part of the ser verb table. However, you can use the compound tenses, ha cocido, she or he has cooked, or possession, I have a menu. Hector is happy. Is that permanent or temporary? Hector is a chef. Do we translate that? Is chef a profession considered permanent or temporary? Again, Hector has a toothache. Now, is that using the possessive form of have with objects, or Hector has a spoon? You see, you have to work it out. It's very easy, just apply some intelligence. Okay, so verb tables. I'll explain to you why this is important to understand why I'm talking about verb tables. A verb table is simply all the different variations. So the verb table of the present tense of to be is I am, you are, he, we are, you are, they are. Are you, he, these are all called the subject pronoun. And these are all the variations. Together this makes the present tense verb table. Again, the present tense of the verb to cook, I cook, you cook. You say, well, so what? Okay. In terms of your Spanish language and approaching verbs, you're going to go, well, what is a verb table? Well, a verb table are just all these different variations, okay? In English, with the verb to be, there's only am, one change, two changes. Otherwise, it's are. Okay, in the cook, you have I cook, you cook, he cooks, we cook, you cook, they cook. The only change is this, what's called the suffix. The only one is with he, she, or it cooks. You go, I cook, you cook, he cooks, we cook, you cook, they cook. I am, you are, he is, we are, you are, they are. Well, it doesn't work like that with Romantic languages. This is a Germanic language. English is called a Germanic language with a mega input of from the Vikings, basically. North of Denmark, north of Germany, the Vikings and Dutch. It's called a Germanic language. The aeroplane is flying. Now, when I translate is, you can hear it in the background, is it a permanent state, a temporary state, or is it a verb? Is flying is a verb, so we're always going to use estar. El avión está volando. Now say, I am unhappy. Am I unhappy temporarily or permanently because of the plane? I'm using temporary, so I am yo estoy infeliz, unhappy. Triste. The airplane's gone, let's get back. So, English, this is a Germanic language, it's called, and it's called analytic as well, but leave that for advanced. So, there's no changes. Now, when we're looking at every single Spanish verb, the Spanish verbs are a Romantic language, and every single part is different. You go, OMG, oh my God. It's easy, but we have to come to terms with learning Spanish verbs. learning how to express yourself correctly. So the present tense of the Spanish verb estar is yo estoy, estás, tú estás, ella está, estamos, estáis, están. Every ending is different. To be, soy, eres, es. Somos, sois, son. Not one of those is the same. Whereas in English, they're all the same, apart from the third person singular. You see, English is so easy with its verbs. Now, there is a reason why you have to learn all of these. It takes time, but you will get there. So, I'm now going to show you the verb tables of tener and haber. Again, tengo, tienes, tiene. Tenemos, tenéis, tienen. Has, ha, hemos, habéis, han. The present tense of the verb haber. So, every present tense verb, the overwhelming lot begin with an O, without an accent there, you see. So, tengo, the present tense of venir, to come, would be vengo. The present tense of comer would be como. So whenever it ends in an O, it's a sign. It tells you that it's the I have. Likewise, when we say we, it's always hemos or amos, depending on the verb. You see, so it repeats. So if I say we walk, caminamos. If I say we eat, comemos. If I say we, focusing on we, whatever would you like. We drink, nosotros bebemos. So you may go, it's all different, oh my God, but don't worry, because there are these guides there. If I say tengo, I know it's I. If I say tenemos, I know it's we. Tienen, ending in en or an, are always, it's they, okay? There's a pattern. You got to know this pattern. We are getting there. 4 minutes and we'll be halfway through. Yeah. So, Carlos is right. Another thing about Spanish is that it's called be replacement. Sometimes in English we use the word to be when they will use to have. It's a total reverse. Carlos is right. In the Spanish, they will say, Carlos has reason. Carlos tiene razón. Have to be using tener. Be careful. They would say, have care. How old are you in English? They will say, how many years do you have? So often we translate the verb to be in English, I am, you are, he is, be, and they translate with have, the verb, the form of tener. It's called be replacement. Now, we have looked at stative verbs. We've looked at the verb to be and the verb to have, focusing on translating temporary states and permanent states, and also looking at the verb to have with an object, and something. I have a book, I have money, I have a pen. We use a tener, etc. And now we're going to go on to fientive verbs. What do you say? Fientive. Just, if you don't want to get into it, just call them dynamic verbs or action verbs. They don't reflect around the personal. They're not personal verbs. They're impersonal. So we go, they don't affect the person. So cook, swim, order, write, catch, climb, they all are an action, an expressed action rather than an impressed action. You see, they're called fientive verbs. This is where we're going now, and I'll make it as interesting as I can. Fientive. If you're not into this grammar, which I hope you will be, because it is so exciting. Just call it a dynamic or an action verb, if you like. Fientive verbs. We're looking at verb conjugation, and we're looking again, we've looked at, but again, verb tables, verb conjugation. So, conjugation. I expressed this is a verb table. See? Don't be scared when you hear a verb table. It's simple. It just means the variations of a particular table. But you have the past tense and the present tense. Oh, I cook, you cook, he cook, we cook. This is called a verb table, and it's formed. They say it's formed in the present tense. Past tense would be I cooked, you cooked, he cooked, we cooked, you cooked, they cooked, okay? Now, this is the only one that's marked for tense. I marked as in it's a variation from the basic verb to cook. If you're struggling so far, pause it, have a drink, or let's march on, and if you can remember the word marked for tense, it'll help you right now, as you'll find out. But it's got a change in it. It's changed. Because English is Germanic. It doesn't change, Now, I'll explain to you why this is relevant to help your understanding of verbs. So let's take the English verb to swim. In Spanish, it's nadar. Nadar. In English, being a Germanic language, you see that, let me get that lower down. English being a Germanic language, the noise is loud. An adjective, el ruido está alto. I'm going to pause this for a second. Good. So remember, in green, that's the noun, the subject pronoun. Pronouns and nouns I do in green, and verbs I do in red. And this blue, just dark blue, shows you the change. So remember, here's the Spanish. I swim, you swim, he swims, we swim, you swim, they swim. The only change is in the third person. Now in Spanish, every bit changes. Yo nado, nadas, nada, nadamos, nadais, nadan. You see that? But this is a pattern, as I've explained. The first person, I, ends in an O. The you always ends in an AS or an ES, usually. The third person always ends up in an A, and the first person, plural, nosotros, we, ends up in amos. This level is only used in mainland Spain, but not in it's not used in Latin America, where most of the Spanish is spoken in the world. And an or en for the third person. This is because Spanish is a romantic language. Like French, Portuguese, and Italian, and Romanian, the verbs have a different code, if you like. English, we only got one change in the present tense of the verb to swim. In Spanish, there are 6 changes. I, you, he, she, we, you, or they all change. That's why Spanish verbs are more difficult at the beginning than English verbs. You see now, why is this so important? Because in Spanish, they rarely use I, you, he, she, we, you, or they. They drop it. So when we say, if I say to you the past tense, swam, 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 you wouldn't know who was doing the swimming, whether it was I swam or you swam or we swam or they swam. It's all just swam, 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 swam. Right. You need to say they swam or you swam in order to know who is doing the swimming. In Spanish, you don't need these subject pronouns, so they drop them. And you just say nadé. And you know it's the I swam because nadé is the ending for I swam. And if you have they swam Aaron, I know that is they. So it has to be they, because it can't be he, she, or it, or you, or I. Aaron is always for they. So they will say nadaron, meaning they swam. And Spanish don't use the subject pronouns. In English, you have to use the subject pronouns because as I've explained, you can't say swam, 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 swam. You've got to identify who is doing the swimming. In Spanish, they don't identify who's doing the swimming using a subject pronoun. They identify it by the ending. This is called the suffix. Because the stem, I nad, like in swam, 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 swam. The stem, nad, in red, the suffix, the bit after, tells you who's doing the swimming. Again, in the present tense as well. Swim, swim, swims. Okay. Swim, 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 swim. Like swam, 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 swam. You need to, if I say swim, 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 you need to say, well, they swim or I swim. You need, what do you need? You need the subject pronoun. Now in Spanish you don't. So in the present sense they go nado, nadath, nada, nadamos, nadais, nadan. And if you're in mainland Spain around Madrid, don't forget to pronounce the na with a th sound. Nado. A soft th sound. Nado, nadath, nada. So the ending. You have to choose any verb, like to swim, nadar, and learn that. Nado, nadath, nadan, nadamos, nadais, nadan. The past. Nade, nadasti, nado. Nadamos, nadais, nadastais, pardon, nadaron. It's a weird coincidence, but I always wasn't going to tell you, but the past tense of we is the same as it is in the present tense. It's a anomaly in the Spanish language. You can see that. Okay, so what I've just explained to you is called pro-drop. They drop the subject pronoun. It's called subject pronoun dropping. So in English we would say they cook. In Spanish they will drop the they, will just say cocinan, because it tells us it is they that are doing the cooking. If it was I cook, it would say cocino. Cocino. So the end bit tells me whether it's I, you, he, she, we, you, or they. Okay? They cook. Ellos cocinan. You can put they in the front if you want. Ellos is they. But they don't. 90%, 95% of the time they just say cocinan. Because the AN bit tells you that it's. If you haven't got an ear for Spanish and you don't know these endings, you'll never know who is doing the cooking. So try to learn a verb, choose a verb, any verb, maybe to write, and try and learn it in the present tense and learn it in the past tense. Okay? That really will help you with your Spanish verbs. Step 5. We're looking at tense and aspect. Verbs, tense and aspect. Again, why? Because I want to know how Spanish verbs are working and are functioning. Tense, when we say tense, you may have the word and go, well, what is tense? Another grammatical term. Well, tense is just the time of the action, whether it was, say, in the past or the present. An aspect is a breakdown of how the action unfolds, or progresses, if you like. So, tense is the time. It's in traditional grammar, which is what I teach you. It's either the past or the present, and then you have aspects of that. I break that down, okay? So if you say I walked, it's past. Caminé, I walked. But if I say I was walking, that's also in the past. I have walked, I had walked, etc. They're all in the past again, but what we've done is we've added a dimension of how the action is folding. I was walking, blah, 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 when. I had eaten before Dolores arrived, if you like, or I have eaten, see? So the aspect adds the have or the had or the was bit to the past tense. Tense. Tense is considered the present or the past with its aspects, and the future is considered a possibility. It's a possibility or probability that the action will occur without any certainty. So the future in standard grammar is not considered a tense, because tense refers to time, and the future is an unknown element. Key to understanding Spanish. Okay, not in English, but if you can remember this, when you get to part 4, then when I cover the subjunctive, understanding this will really, really help you. The future is a possibility or a probability or an expectation or an intention. It's not a time in grammar. We have the past and the present, okay? And the future are called modes, and the conditional I would buy the book if I had the money. I would like a cup of tea. It's an expectation. I will buy a book. Future. I may buy the book, or I hope to buy the book. It's actually the subjunctive. These are all called modes. So future and conditional, if you've ever heard of them in a grammar book elsewhere, it's not a tense, it's a mode. They're called modes. The past we use as a narrative to describe things that have occurred, and the present is descriptive to describe things that are occurring. Look at that more in advanced grammar. So, the two-told division of time, the past and the present. And the past is then divided into an aspect. Simple past is I swam. A compound past is I was swimming, I have swum, I had swum, if you want. Aspect breaks down the past from the simple. The simple aspect is just I swam. And then you see how verbs are working. It's interesting, okay? I speak, present simple. I am speaking. The compound is called the progressive or the continuous. I am swimming, or he is swimming. Is swimming is called the present continuous. It's called a compound. And the aspect is this. Is swimming is showing the aspect. It's an activity ongoing. Okay. I swim is different from he is swimming or I am swimming, you see? And again, with time, you say I swam is different. If you say I was swimming, blah, 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 when I lost my whatever. Oh, I have swum before. Have you swum? I swam. Have you swum? You see? So whenever it becomes longer, i.e. with 2 bits, or it can have 3 bits, but 2 bits, it's called the aspect. And it diverges from the simple swim. It's called compound. Now, unfortunately, we do have, or fortunately, we do have another 30 minutes to go. We haven't got there yet. So Spanish past aspects are not always compound. I've explained to you just now what an aspect is. If I want to say I was walking, was walking it's a verb phrase. These 2 bits together help to form the past progressive, which is called, we call it in English, well, we call it the past progressive, we call it the imperfect, if you like. In Spanish, they just say yo caminaba. One word. It's one word, not 2. Do you see that? So when you're describing things in the past, they use the preterito imperfecto, and it's a form of the imperfect tense. They just say yo caminaba to mean I was walking. It's good to know that, okay? So when you're describing something in the past, they just have one word, not 2. Simple tenses. Simple tenses are, as I've said, one word. So the simple past is Pepe cooked. Say Pepe cocinó. Remember that that is not correct. Who wrote that? Must have been me. It's Pepe cociné. Oh, it is right. It is correct. All right. You see that? That little accent there, it's not I cooked. Cocino is I cooked. But when it has an accent there, it means the third person cooked. The way it was correct. So the present tense simple, the present simple is Pepe cooks. And in Spanish it's Pepe cocina. Pepe cocina. Okay. Present simple is the same in Spanish. It just has one word. Pepe cooked, Pepe cocinó, and Pepe cooks in the present, Pepe cocina. Compound tenses, okay, a simple tense will be I sell. A compound tense is I am selling. It's got 2 parts. It's compounded. Remember, as I was saying, so he was cooking in English is translated with us in a compound in English, but it's a simple in Spanish, a simple. El cocinaba. In English, I will cook, he will cook, the future mode. He will cook. In Spanish, it just says, it's one word, cocinaré. And in English, we say he would cook, conditional mode. In Spanish, they call el cocinaría. The Spanish is translating would cook with one word and will cook with one word. Remember that compound tenses is together. 2 words is selling. Okay, it's called a verb phrase. That one we will leave for advanced. Okay? So, the Spanish have 3 ways to say I was swimming. I'll explain to you now. Why do we need to know this? Because the Spanish, you will hear these ways of speaking Spanish language. So if you say I was swimming, we just say in English I was swimming. The Spanish break that down. Were you swimming over a repeated period? Were you swimming for a specific amount of time, or were you swimming in the past, or are you describing what you were doing? So was the swimming happening for a certain period of time, say 2 hours? Was it happening often when you used to live in a place, for example? Or are you just describing something that you were doing recently? You see that? Now, I'll show you. Lexical and auxiliary, yeah. So when we're, the lexical verb is just, I swim. And we add an auxiliary, I can swim, I would swim, I have swim. I'm going to leave that and for the advanced course, actually. We'll leave that. We'll come back to that in more later on. So we've now reached part 6. Excuse that sheet being in there, we'll leave that. Step 6, rather, of part 2, dealing with verbs. Verb conjugation. Okay, now you go, what? In English there are called 12 tenses, and in Spanish there are 18 tenses. When you see this, people say, oh, in English there are many different variations of time. It's true. There are very fewer variations of time. Spanish is much more specific about your verb use. So these tenses we'll break it down. They're actually, when you see that, it's not true. There are just 2 tenses with progressive aspects, i.e. compound verbs. I was swimming, compound mode, I will swim, I would swim, I had been swimming, I have been swimming. It was all compound, but basically they're all going on in the past. In the present, I am swimming. I will be swimming, and it when you see this, and people go, oh, there are so many different, more verbs in Spanish. It all can be broken down quite simply. Now, when we are looking at Spanish verbs, finally we come to this point. Now, all Spanish regular verbs, actually like 98% of them, either end in AR, ER, or IR. They all end in AR, ER, and IR. Now these is going to help us. Okay, so for example, the word to fish in Spanish is pescar, or pescar. The verb to drink is beber, ending in ER. The verb to write is escribir, with IR. So 60% of Spanish verbs ending in AR, and then maybe 30% end in ER, and then 10% less end in IR, and IR is slightly more irregular. And then you have irregular verbs, which are very few, which are ser, caer, and ir. So perhaps I ought to have said 55% 55% verbs are AR, 30% are ER, like 7% and IR, and the rest are irregulars like ser, ir, and caer, although it's ER is irregular. Okay, so Spanish verbs have basic patterns. Cocinar is the thing you say, so an AR verb. So cocin is the stem and the AR is the suffix. The present tenses, we've looked at some present tenses already, but now you should find this part easy after all that I've explained to you. Present simple. We know what simple means, don't we? It's just going to say, I cook, I swim. You say, Fernando is the noun, and to cook is the verb. Fernando in Spanish is the same as it's a proper noun name, which don't change. And cocinar, to cook. That's our present. That's our verb. So the present simple, i.e. just one word of the verb, we say Fernando cooks, Fernando cocina. It's the present simple. Present continuous, Fernando is cooking. It shows a progressive action. Okay. I swim, simple. I am swimming, progressive. Past tenses. We have the past simple. Now you probably know. I'll put that there like that to make it past simple. Past simple. Simple doesn't mean stupid. It means that it's only got one aspect to it. So the past simple of to cook is I cooked, you cooked, he cooked, we cooked, you cooked, they cooked. Yo cociné, cocinaste, cocinó. Cocinamos, cocinasteis, cocinaron. Okay, learn these endings. And this is cocinar, to cook. I, you, he, she, we, you, they. This is called the first person is called I, the second person is you, the third person is called he. Now the second group, we start again. This is called the first person plural, the second person plural, the third person plural, do you see? So this is how they do it. They go first person, I, second you, and they start again. So this is the singular group, this is the plural group. We, you all, and they, it's called like the plural part, and this is called like the singular part. The idea of person, grammar they call it the person, okay? Just a term. Person to refer to I, you, he, she, we, they, it's critical. Thems. So, we've established that Spanish has AR, ER, and IR verb endings. Cocinar, beber, hervir. Hervir, to boil. So, to conjugate is simply to add the right bits at the end. So, with the past verb table, the past tense of we have I, we're going to translate the first person. Okay, the first person is I, first person singular I, and this is actually a little magic table. You've got cocino, means I cooked. Cociné is the ending for I cooked. Cociné is an exception to, well, imperative, but I won't talk about that. Cocinia, I was, no, cocinando, cooking, cocinando, cocinando, cocinia, no, that is correct, that, it's cocinaba. Cocinaba means I was cooking. So, cocino, I cook, cociné, I cooked, that is the imperative. Cocinaba is I was cooking, cocinando, cooking. See, so all these endings, bebo, I drink, bebe, I drank, bebía, I was drinking, bebiendo, drinking, to form my... The IR ending verbs, whenever you find them, are very much formed like the ER verbs. So, hervir, irregular, hiervo, I boiled, I boil, herví, I boiled, herviré, I will boil, herviría, I would boil, hirviendo, it means boiling. You could say I was boiling, I am boiling. So, yendo. You see, these have a similarity. So AR verbs are formed in one particular way. ER and IR verbs tend to have similar endings, with subtle differences. So it helps you when you're looking to conjugate your IR verbs, kind of refer to ER verbs. To have, haber. Okay, so we're going to come briefly back to haber. We're nearly finished now, but remember we were saying in the beginning of this part, to have haber. Now, haber is used when to make compound tenses. Pedro has sold. Has sold is a compound tense. It's two parts form the verb phrase. So Pedro, using the verb haber, Pedro ha vendido naranja. Pedro has sold naranja. So when we translate has sold, we don't use tener, the verb tener, but we use the Spanish verb haber for to have. Haber is used with time to express progression. Volar, to fly. The parrot flies. Flies. Not is flying, but you see that's the present simple. Vuela, with AR verb, so volar. There is no aspect. Fly is a fientive, it's an action word, and there is no auxiliary there. The parrot was flying. Now this has is a compound tense, which is the aspect. The aspect is basically how he was flying. So the parrot flies is just a simple past, but to say the parrot was flying, it now looks at how the parrot was flying. And in Spanish, you can say el loro. Loro is one type of generic word for parrot. El loro estaba volando. The parrot was flying. Estaba volando. With past compound tenses, we now know what compound, where we have the imperfect and the perfective. So the imperfect is Fernando was cooking. Okay, that's called the imperfect. Perfect means past. And the past, when you say perfect, funny word, simple word, but very deceptive. It's a closed window. It's completed action. It has happened. Perfected tense. So the imperfect, it was ongoing and remained ongoing. Fernando was cooking, blah, blah, blah. But when it's perfect, we got, for example, the present perfect. Fernando has cooked. Fernando had cooked. It is an action that's considered to have been completed. It has a duration. Okay? So when you approach Spanish verbs, be aware of what's going on. Slightly more advanced grammar here, but when you're looking at Spanish verbs, it helps to understand the difference between an imperfect tense and a perfect tense. The imperfect tense, in English, they like to call it the past progressive, but being traditional, we call it the imperfect tense. Fernando was cooking, with the compound verb phrase. Fernando was cooking for 3 hours. Now I've specified for how long he was cooking. Spanish have a specific way of translating was when you identify the time. Fernando used to cook when he lived in Seville in Spanish. Fernando used to cook, it's expressing how he was cooking. Okay? It explains the how Fernando was cooking. Now, Spanish again have a different verb for when the action was repeated or used to happen over a period of time. Fernando was cooking. In English, we just have was cooking, was cooking, was cooking. In Spanish, they don't. Imperfect has three different aspects, three different ways to form the compound was cooking. Fernando was cooking. Basically, we could say Fernando estaba cocinando. Estaba was cocinando. If I say to you, Fernando was cooking for 3 hours, I then have to use estuve. You see, not estaba, but estuve. Estuve, estuviste, estuvo. Like here. Estuvimos, estuvisteis, estuvin. I think that's right. Fernando estuve cocinando durante 3 horas. I've specified for the period he was cooking, so I have to use estuve. Okay. If you're advanced, that you will know that that is the perfecto indefinido progresivo. Just call it the imperfect in English if you want. But when you specify a period of time or you're watching something which occurs over a specific period of time, it's estuve. Fernando estuve cocinando durante 3 horas. Now, when Fernando used to cook, when he lived in Sevilla, i.e. an action that occurred over a period of time, you don't use estaba cocinando cuando vivía in Sevilla. You don't use estuve cocinando. Because it was over a long period of time, you say Fernando cocinaba cuando vivía en Sevilla. You also use the imperfect simple when you are describing a story or recalling something. So when you're mentioning a specific amount of time, you use estuve. When you're just generally narrating or talking, you say estaba. And when you just have one word. Tricky, hey? But in English, we just have was cooking, was cooking, was cooking. But in Spanish, they don't. They break down how the action of cooking was unfolding. Nadar, to swim. I was. So they can say in Spanish 3 ways to say I was. Estaba nadando, estuve nadando, and nadaba. They all mean, in English, was swimming. Estuve, if I want to say I was swimming for 4 hours, I was swimming while the film was playing. I was swimming while she cooked. If you could say that, if you want to know how, if you was cooking for a specific amount of time. And if you want to describe an action, a story, you're recounting a story, narraba. And if you're generally just going, I was swimming, estaba nadando, if you're talking about was in the recent present, okay? ¿Dónde estaba? Where were you? I was swimming, estaba nadando. Oh, okay. So for general conversation, you will just use estaba. But if you're recalling and narrating something that happened, use nadaba. Tricky. But they're all from nadar. Nadando, nadando, nadaba. Okay. I was swimming in the sea. Oh, which beach? In a conversation. Estaba nadando en el mar. I was swimming for 2 hours. Or I was swimming yesterday. Estuve nadando ayer. I used to swim when I lived in Cartagena. Nadaba cuando bebía en Cartagena. The parrot was sitting when I saw him. Okay, you're recalling a past action. So I use el loro sentaba, was sitting. A custom, it happened. The table of estar is simply formed with the perfect tense of estoy or estar. So estuve, estuviste, esto. Estuvimos, estuvisteis. Okay, I was correct. 5 minutes ago. Estuvieron. The past tense of the verb ser. Fui, fuiste, fui. Fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. Perfect tenses. Perfect tenses. We have looked at a couple because imperfect is it's a preterite, i.e. it's a past tense. But present perfect, Fernando has cooked. Past perfect, Fernando had cooked. Okay? So it's simple. In Spanish, you can look at the table. Fernando has cooked, Fernando ha cocinado. Fernando had cooked, Fernando había cocinado. There's no problem. It's a direct translation. You have to learn, you know, the past tense of had, of have, or had, and the past and the you know, the present perfect, as we say in English. To learn those, has, ha, hemos, habéis, and the pluperfect, or you can call it the past perfect, había, había, estaba, habíamos, habéis, haben. You've got to learn some of these tables. It's simple. Future and conditional are not times, they're called modes, modes of possibility. In the future, in Spanish, you say, I will eat. In English, it's a compound verb phrase. In Spanish, it's not, it's one word. Yo comeré. Comer, E-R-A. Comeré, I will eat. I would eat, again, is a compound in English. In Spanish, as I explained previously, is comería. I would eat. I used to live. Oh, I used to eat. Used to live. Used to eat. Comía. I might redo this sheet. So, in English, Spanish, nadaré, nadaría, nadaba. A simple one word. Don't worry too much about this, but I've just actually given you the present tense of the verb nadar, and I've given the future table, i.e. the future table, verb table of nadar, and I've given you the conditional verb table of the verb nadar. Pause this and try to reflect on what I've said. I will eat. Comeré, one word instead of two, and I would eat comería. Oh, I would have said, habría dicho, would have said. So in English we use 3 words and they will just use 2 words, habría dicho. Now, we've just about finished. I swam at 3 o'clock. He nadado a las 3. You can say that. So you can say, I swam at 3. In Spanish, you often hear them use the word, not using the past simple, but you say them using the present perfect. So they say, well, I swam at 3. In English, that's called the preterite, or the past, simple past. But in Spanish, you will actually say them using the present perfect. I he nadado a las 3. In English, you would say, that would translate literally as I have swum at 3. But in Spanish it means you can say it as I swam at 3. So when they say, hey, he nadado a las 3, you think it literally, it means I have swum at 3. They mean it to mean I swam at 3. You can learn all these different forms of that. I will have been writing. Well, this is more advanced. I think we've reached the end of our fierce introduction to Spanish verb formation, but I will have been writing. Slightly advanced, but if you want, you've got I will is the modal auxiliary, have is the primary stative verb, the aspect is have been, and writing is the verbal, the participle. The participle verbal. See, all these verb things are composed of parts, but this is slightly more advanced. Again, Perhaps I should have left that for the advanced course. So the key terms of verbs are these. And can you remember any of these from the last hour? Can you remember these when I've talked about tense? Remember that there is just the past and the present tense, and then those individual past and present are broken down into the aspect to show progressive action. Do you remember when I said the word fientive? Do you remember what a fientive verb is? It's a verb, an action verb, a dynamic verb they call them. So dig, hit, wait, write, teach, swim, cook. They're all called fientive. Aspect. Do you remember aspect? Okay, well done. Aspect is when we break down the past and the present tenses with their aspect. Compound. Do you remember compound? Compound is when there is a compound aspect, and that would be I was walking is a compound, and then I walked. So just a pomegranate drink there I'm making. And so compound, perfective and imperfective. Do you remember that? Perfective and imperfective. Imperfect tenses. I was, estuve, estaba, nadaba. The imperfect, using the word was, the three versions of was. And the perfective tense, you have had and have. Preterite means past. It's another word for past. Stative verbs, remember that? To be and to have. I have a book, and I am happy, or I am a teacher. Stative verbs. Simple. Modal. But I won't go into that too much. We'll come back into again. Participle. I am swimming. Swimming is called the participle part, always end in ing when it's the present participle. So these verbs are very rarely used. Past perfect progressive, future past perfect. I will have been sleeping. I have been sleeping. I would have been sleeping. You see, but they do exist, but we're not bothered with those too much. Division of time into two states of being and action. The past, the present, progressive action, simple action, past, preterite is divided into perfective, I have or had, and the imperfective. Let me just add had there as well. I can put had there. We'll get that. If you see the verb podcast again and you don't see this, you'll know that it's a follow-up. It's another recording. So, in English, there are 12 different tenses. Present, present progressive, past simple, present perfect, past imperfect. Then you have the modes. You have future simple, conditional simple, and then you have imperative. Okay, so there are all these different ways of breaking down time. Lastly, remember that in English, sometimes the changes are internal. So drink, there's a drunk, the end bit stays the same. Drank, the middle in bit. In Spanish, you never get this. Internal changes, the changes are always on the end. So I've just said that. I've just included this out of interest. That's the end. Slightly ran out of steam at the end, but we've hopefully opened up your mind to Spanish verbs and how they work. In part 3, we look at objects. So if I say Pepe, the subject, noun, cooked, cooks, the verb, And the object is, what does he cook? Soup. In the third part, we will look at objects, the object. Pepe cooks soup. Soup is the object. And we'll look at the order of object pronouns, direct and indirect object pronouns. It's really exciting, and I know that this has been slightly complex. Spanish verbs are complex, but if you can't take the whole of this together, please just pause it and go back to it. And just then go away and record in your mind what I have communicated to you, some of the ideas regarding Spanish verbs. I could have divided this into 2 parts, but I've specifically encompassed a grand deal about Spanish verbs in 1 part. The idea is that you do not have to mentally listen to the whole complete podcast. Thank you very much, and I hope that you have enjoyed this introduction and intermediate level approach to Spanish verbs.